Welcome back to Careers and Coffee Talk. I'm your host, Laura. Today's guest is someone I had the privilege of working with during my time at Fema, and honestly, he's someone whose leadership left a real impression on me throughout my own career. Jeremy Greenberg has spent more than 2 decades serving in some of the most demanding environments imaginable, leading teams through disasters, coordinating national response operations, and helping guide the country through moments of extreme uncertainty and crisis. Jeremy is currently the president of Provincial Strategies, an emergency and risk management consulting firm. He's a senior advisor to Aspen Digital at the Aspen Institute, and he's also an adjunct instructor for the University of Chicago's Threat and Risk Management program. Before that, he served over 23 years at the federal level, including 5 years in the senior executive service. Most recently, he led FEMA's Response Operations Division, overseeing some of the agency's most critical national coordination and operational capabilities, including the FEMA Operations Center, the National Response Coordination Center, the National Launch Center, and the National Urban Search and Rescue Program. Over the course of his career, he's responded to hundreds of disasters and incidents, ranging from hurricanes and wildfires to cyber incidents and terrorist attacks. As if that wasn't enough, Jeremy has also managed to find the time over the last 20 years volunteering as a firefighter, EMT, and instructor in his community, which I think really says a lot about who he is at his core. Let's get into it. Jeremy Greenberg, it's so good to have you. Thank you so much for being here.
It's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
You know already that I always start by asking if you have a coffee. Do you have your coffee ready?
I do. It is ready,
And are
and
you
I'm
drinking
happy to.
anything special?
So the coffee itself is not special, but
Okay.
not because of the podcast, but because I've been obsessing about this. I recently switched from a pod based machine to a fresh ground coffee
Oh,
machine,
yeah,
and it is absolutely life-changing.
it is.
Uh, I probably spent a little more time researching it than I would like to admit, but I'm very excited about fresh coffee now.
I'm so excited for you, and you're in good company because I made that switch maybe a year ago, and it is, I agree, it's life-changing.
Oh, great. We can spend the whole podcast talking about them
Let's
because
just talk
I
about that. Yeah, that's fine.
But no, it is and my wife is not a coffee drinker, but she has started to get
Okay.
on board and she loves the new machine as well. So big win in the house.
This is very exciting. I'm so
Yeah.
happy for you. So I also like to start by asking, kind of before the journey all started, when you were young, was there anything in particular that you thought you would be when you grew up?
I don't know if there's anything that I thought I would be, but definitely from a young age, I was drawn to fire trucks and ambulances
Okay.
and you know, being a boy, it was a natural like draw to lights and sirens, which sort of I think helped inform my career path.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me about that. What were your early jobs like?
So I grew up on Long Island, in New York, and where I grew up down South Shore, a lot of the folks in town were FDNY firemen and
Mhm.
volunteers, a big volunteer community in and around the EMS and fire department. So I actually joined the ambulance company when I was 16 years old, mainly
Mhm.
because my parents didn't want me to join the fire department. You had to be 18, without your parents' signature.
Yeah.
So I joined the ambulance company when I was 16 and started volunteering and absolutely loved it.
Mhm.
In New York, you could be what's called a CFR, a certified first responder, and
Okay.
it was something to do. It was fun. I built camaraderie, taught me some really cool skills, and then sort of set that trajectory to join the fire department, and then ultimately the draw to. I always wanted to go to school in DC because I love like the government feel of the
Mhm.
district and the monuments and the whole. Watched a ton of movies about DC, so I think both those things probably just drew me into the public service space.
Yeah. And was I knew you were at Fema, which is where we met. By the way, I don't think I ever knew you were a Long Islander, and I don't hear the
Yeah,
accent at all.
I spent a lot of time in Central Texas, so it balanced it
Yeah.
out perfectly. Yeah,
Okay. This is news to me. So
yeah.
we met at FEMA, obviously, but that's not where you started in government. What was your first government role?
So I was at GS4. So I started as a GS4 and went through SES. Started as an intern at the Department of Justice.
Okay.
My senior year of high school or senior college, got an internship, and then they transitioned it to a full-time job. And let me tell you, a GS4 doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're in college, making decent money and you have
Yeah.
this job and Department of Justice, you had a little badge too. Like back in the day, it wasn't as cool as they are today, but like it was this sense of opportunity. So yeah, started as a GS4, worked at DOJ for a number of years, and then I went to the Hill, worked for a member of Congress from Central Texas, so that's how I wound
Okay.
up spending a lot of time in Texas. And then started at DHS after 9/11 when the department was formed. And after a couple of years, the National Exercise Division, which when it first started was at DHS, and then it went to FEMA after Katrina. I went to Department of Transportation and spent probably about 7 or 8 years there, which was awesome. Planes,
Mhm.
trains, automobiles. Worked in the operations center, deployed a bunch, did all sorts of cool things, and then came back to FEMA to for the last 8 or 9 years.
Yeah. What was it that originally pulled you to the mission at FEMA? Was it 9/11?
So I was working on the Hill during 9/11
Mm.
and in the fire department. So I think it was, yeah, I mean, that was obviously a pivotal moment for anyone in emergency management, whether you were a seasoned emergency manager at the time, new in
Mhm.
emergency management, or maybe still in school. I would say that that's probably a particularly pivotal moment. But even before the 9/11, when I was working on the Hill, President Bush at the time had built a Western White House down
Mhm.
in Crawford, Texas, and I had done a ton of work with the International Firefighters Association, the Congressional Fire Service Institute, and it really was this perfect blend of like, hey, riding fire trucks is super cool, while emergency management is not a first responder, and we can talk about that later, how different they
Mhm.
are, but it was this natural draw of like wanting to work for the federal government, wanting to be in DC, wanting to do things that were helping people. And I think that just carried over naturally to, hey, here's this super cool opportunity. Let's go do this. And ironically, well, not ironically, but interestingly, the way I wound up at DHS proper was through the fire department. I was an instructor out of the academy talking about wanting to leave the Hill. And a friend of mine worked at DHS in the exercise division. Next thing
Mhm.
you
There
know
you
how the
are.
city works. There we are. Yeah, it was great.
Let's talk about that difference between emergency management and first responders, because I think one thing, and you probably can relate to this, but people hear, after a disaster is like, where's FEMA, right? Like where are the emergency managers when there's kind of this distinction between like the first responders, the public servants who are like on the scene, boots on the ground, right? And then FEMA, which is kind of a coordinator of sorts, right? Talk to me a little bit about that distinction.
Yeah, I think it's a really important distinction for a variety of reasons. But
Hmm.
the first is about trust and expectation management. So every day throughout the United States, people call 911 and the fire department shows up, the police department shows up, the ambulance company shows up, the
Hmm.
power company right? Like whatever public service you need, you get.
Hmm.
And in some cases, it's really vast and complex. Like I live in Fairfax County. It's a very complex organization and tons of resources that can go. In more rural areas, it's not as robust, but equally
Hmm.
important that when you call 911, like something comes and helps you. That's a first response organization. And you know this through your experience, but as a incident escalates, right, and it becomes more complicated, that's where the role of the emergency management organization steps in, whether it's a local EM, stadium, or the national level. It's about coordinating resources. It's about establishing some sense of a unified coordination. So who's in charge tactically, who's in charge as you go up the chain ultimately to the president if you're talking national level issues, who's deploying resources, right? When you need more stuff, who do you call? And then where do you get that from? And even more now, who's doing that planning, right? The future planning to look at, okay, I got a tactical problem right here, but who's thinking about it in hopefully an air conditioned room or at least an air conditioned truck. You're like doing the forward thinking and the forward planning for whoever's doing the tactics. And then thinking about messaging, how do we communicate to the public about their safety? How do you communicate to the media about what's going on in the incident? How do you communicate to other people who might just generally be interested? So I think there's not a absolute line that says this is a first response mission, this is an
Hmm.
emergency management mission, but
Right.
when you think about scales and complexity, and then Laura, the other thing I would highlight just from my personal experience is having been on the tactical side, the operational side, sort of the strategic side, even though I hate that word, is the distance between the decision and action you take and the time you see the outcome is
Mm,
huge, right? If you're a fireman or firefighter, you're crawling through a house, you spray water, you're going to see whether or not that is enough water and the fire goes out, right? Very
sure.
basic. You're in the National Response Coordination Center, you take an action, it might take days or even weeks in some cases before you see whether there's an impact to the action you took. So it's like you're still trying to help somebody. You're always focused on mission, but it's
Yeah.
that scale and the distance between the time of your decision and the outcome that really is very significantly.
Yeah, and let's get into that a little bit, right? When
Yeah.
you led FEMA's response operations division, right? And you were overseeing some of the agency's most critical operational centers. When you're operating with very little information at times, right? The information is complete. You're having to make decisions very, very quickly. What does that look like? I mean, what did it look like for you?
It's hard.
Yeah.
So there's an old adage that the best thing you can do is the right thing, the second best thing you can do is the worst thing, and the worst thing you can do is nothing. And that's not to suggest that we operate like cowboys and just go make a decision and run
Sure.
with it, but you can't be afraid to make a decision, and equally, you can't be afraid to say, "Ooh, I was wrong." Right?
Hmm.
One of the things I took great pride in was openly admitting I was wrong. Hey, we went down a path one way. We had limited information at the time. We thought it was this, and it
Hmm.
wasn't. It turned out not to be the case. Um, whether it was tactical decisions about where we were going to deploy medical resources or understanding the root cause of an actual problem all the time. It was like, hey, we have limited information. Great, let's try this approach and we'll see what happens. And related to that is, even if somebody gives you a bit of information, hanging out in the NRCC is like one of the analogies I used all the time was like watching a fireplace on TV. You
Hmm.
could see it, you knew what it looked like, but you couldn't hear it crackle and you definitely couldn't smell it. And
Right.
when you're at a disaster, right? So you're forward deployed. I always pick any of them, but mo my most recent deployment, North Carolina for Helene or the Maui
Mhm.
fires, you're standing in the problem, right? So your
Yeah.
perspective is certainly shifted around. So I think, when you have limited information, you make the best decision you can, you trust your team, and you communicate openly with the folks in the field, particularly, and the folks, in the region to say, hey, this is why I'm making this decision. I don't, at some point, I'm going to decide and we're going to move forward. Uh, but you have to make that decision, be comfortable with it, and then openly admit where it's not working out.
Yeah, and you just mentioned the NRCC, the National Response Coordination Center. For people outside of the emergency management world, can you paint us a little picture about what that actually feels like in the NRCC during a disaster?
Yeah, absolutely. So, uh, I'm a complete emergency management dork, so I will acknowledge that freely. Some people say Disney World's the best place on earth. To me, I truly think the National Response Coordination Center is for
Okay.
emergency management. And let me go with this for a second. You have like 170. So think about this if you've never been in any sort of operation center, but think about a big room, 180 seats, broken out by functional areas for situational awareness, figuring out what's going on, resource support to get resources there, external affairs, planning, um, individual assistance, public assistance. So all these great functions. It's not just FEMA, right? You have every department and agency represented. You have voluntary organizations represented, and anchored on one side is a media studio where you can do live taping of news broadcasts, public safety messages, anything you want. And then surrounding it is different conference rooms for either leadership or what's called the Movement Coordination Center. Think about tracking everything you're moving around the United States,
Mhm.
all in one space, right? So you have all these people that are working day in and day out, 24-hour shifts as needed to solve a national level problem, right? So that is the coolest place from my perspective. To your question, what it feels like, it kind of depends on what the incident is, and more importantly, where you are in the
Mhm.
disaster. I used to talk about with our whole team of, every disaster has a feel, right? If it's a notice incident, think about a hurricane. The
Yeah.
leading up, it's anticipatory. It's not excitement. People are excited. You don't want this bad thing to happen, but it's anticipating. Did we move all the right stuff to the right place? Did we pre-position? You're using this awesome forecasting, but it's a model. And it's
Mhm.
like you're playing a guessing game of where can I put the resource close enough where it can move it around if I need it, but I don't put it in harm's way. So it's this anticipated angst of, did we get it right? Is the model going to verify? Is the storm going to play the way it intended? And then there's a window from landfall to about 72 hours where you're sort of going through things, and this is if you're in the NRCC, you're
Mhm.
watching it, you're trying to get this bits of data, right? Did did it work? Did it not work? Did we put the stuff in the right spot? And that proof of absence is not the absence of proof is not the proof of absence. Just because you're not hearing anything, don't say all is well.
Hmm.
Uh, and then that 72 hours, that's where you start to get, hey, this road is damaged, this hospital is out, this nursing care facility is down, and you start to see the real impacts. And then I've worked long duration incidents, right, that have taken, COVID took a year or
Hmm.
two. So some of these major disasters, you're just there in a long duration, you ebb and flow, and it feels a little bit different, kind of depending
Yeah.
on where you are.
Yeah. And to your point, right? Like every disaster is different. Some you can anticipate, some you can't. Some are shorter, some have a much longer, recovery time.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you notice, any common themes or any common leadership lessons that you sort of carry across all of those incidents that you've been involved with?
Yeah, I'll offer a couple that I sort of tried to stay true to. So Will Roy, who was the director of operations when I was the deputy, he always had a saying of your job is to solve problems, not create them,
Mm.
which I love, right? Like our job, especially as a backstop for the nation, for the region, for a state, for jurisdiction, like our job, we're problem solvers, right?
Yeah.
So go solve a problem. If you inadvertently create another one, that's okay. Just go solve the problem. And then Dave Bibo, who we both know, always said, beware of unwarranted certitudes, which is a very Bebo-esque saying, but it was like, why did you take something as certain?
Yeah.
And just like question it a little bit, not in a Socratic and annoying, like, I don't trust you way,
Sure.
but give a little bit of the 8-year-old, like, why? 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 And that used to drive my team nuts. I acknowledge that. But it was also really important. So as I went up my chain, I could be able to say with absolute certainty, hey, this is what we know to be true right now. And particularly if you're going up, through officer response recovery to the administrator, the president, you owe it to them to really have done your homework, right? There
Yeah.
were a couple of situations where you're making ultimate life or death decisions on resources, whether it's ventilators during COVID or aircraft during some responses about search and rescue operations. You really need to vet your decision. So
Hmm.
it's just probe a little bit and be sure you know as much as you can, given
Yeah.
what.
Yeah. On sort of that similar token, I guess, there are a lot of things that are very complicated about disaster response. I mean, when you're in it and you know how it works, it's like second nature, right? But for a lot of people that don't work in this space and don't know how a disaster response is coordinated, it can seem a little foreign. There can be some things that maybe the public misunderstands about what that response actually looks like. What do you think are the most common public misconceptions about how national, and I'm talking at the national level, right? Not just a locally led disaster response, but when the federal government is involved, what do you think the public misunderstands the most about how that response actually looks?
There are a couple things. So starting back to your first part about things are complex,
Hmm.
my favorite analogy I use all the time is playing a Rubik's Cube.
Hmm.
So in the NRCC, you're playing about 6 or 8 Rubik's Cube at the same time, sometimes with a blindfold on. And you're
No
like,
big
wait,
deal.
we solved one color, and you're like, oh, I just screwed up something else, right?
Right.
It's understanding those interdependencies. And really like talking to a team of, hey, if I pull this lever, if I line up all these reds or oranges, like what's it going to do to you? Um, on the public side, I think this is something that I've thought about throughout my career. We've debated, and there's great research, and you know it anecdotally, you know it scientifically, is people in the space that we're talking about, people just went through something that's hopefully for them their worst day, as in they won't ever have to experience that again.
Yeah.
And it's whether it's a fire, a flood, an explosion, whatever it is that caused this national response, communities are devastated. So think about this. You're disrupted, your life is disrupted, your community is disrupted, there maybe are fatalities, like there's this trauma on you. So every human is predisposed to want and need everything immediately,
Hmm.
and they're probably overwhelmed with information. So, you thinking about this at scale, I don't know if you ever had a problem, but like I had a flood in my house. My basement flooded from a rainstorm. And at that moment, it was all about, okay, what did I need to do in my house to take care of my family and my things?
Hmm.
So you have this by the hundreds, by the thousands, by the tens of thousands, by the hundreds of thousands, depending on the disaster size. And then it's this expectation of, why isn't FEMA there? Why isn't the federal government there? And not in an apologist way, just as in a, hey, what can FEMA do? So I think part of the challenge is people have a desire to have assistance from the federal government as quickly as they possibly can, and they deserve it.
Hmm.
Uh, but understanding what the capability is that FEMA brings, what the capability is that the other 20 plus departments and agencies bring, and then also what your local jurisdiction has to do. So I would, you know, to the extent that we go out and talk to people, it's one, understand your own preparedness, right? That's a key thing I know you worked on extensively as well. It's like be prepared.
Yeah.
Have your own capability in your house to sustain yourself for a little while, and then think about, what your next plan is going to be, and where you go for that assistance. So I think hopefully answer your question directly, I
Yeah.
think there's a probably a unfair expectation across the board of what level of government provides what level of service, and
Hmm.
how quickly that can be done. But alternatively, it's completely understandable because if you're the
Yeah.
person standing there and it's your home that's destroyed or your family that was impacted, you want as much as you possibly can get as quickly as you possibly can get it.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I was just having a conversation with somebody recently about this and I think you've seen both sides, right, from the national level and supporting, through FEMA and other agencies, and then also volunteering locally as a firefighter and EMT. Um, but there's another piece of this, right? When you are the first responder in a community that has been impacted by disaster, you have your first responders who are showing up for the who are also impacted themselves. Whole nother level of like,
Yeah.
service. What's different about when a crisis happens in your own community?
So a couple things. One, and this will tie maybe this answer and your previous one together. It's understanding who has authority to
Hmm.
solve a problem. So the example I use all the time, when I was at DOT, I was the National Response Program Manager. That was the title. Not that it mattered. It was about like I oversaw all of the emergency response operations for the U.S. Department of Transportation.
Hmm.
As a volunteer firefighter, I rode the back of a fire truck. As a volunteer firefighter, I shut down the Capitol Beltway or several lanes of the Capitol Beltway 3 separate times throughout my
Hmm.
career. Not because I'm cool. There's an accident, right? So you have your incident lane, your working lane plus one because you want to protect everybody's working. I
Yeah.
had all the authority I needed and had, my engine driver just pull right over and just take as many lanes as we needed to stay safe. As the National Response Program Manager for the U.S. Department of Transportation, I had zero authority to shut down any road anywhere.
Ever.
So ever, right? So there's this like juxtaposition where people are like, "Oh, well, the federal government can go do." No, it's mostly regulatory in nature. It's mostly, financial support. It's mostly the initial push of capability. So I think understanding those limits are really,
Yeah.
really important. Like, hey, why didn't these people evacuate? Well, why can't you force them to evacuate? Like all of these discussions that happen.
Hmm.
And to your point about when it impacts you, I think that it is really important. I spent the first part of my federal career deploying to disasters. I was on what's called National Disaster Medical System or NDMS. So I
Hmm.
deployed out. I went to different hospitals and did augmentation support and all these missions, and it was super cool. And you get to see firsthand. What you can do to help someone who needs that assistance.
Hmm.
You can have the discussion, sometimes spirited, right, and heated conversations about, why isn't this here yet, or get me this.
Hmm.
But you need to be able to see that, so you understand what's happening in the community because the distance away, even at when we establish what we call joint field offices, you know them,
Hmm.
but they're away from the disaster or the state operations center. It's going to be geographically away from where something's impacted, and certainly the NRCC is. Um, but it's that scale of distance and understanding that it doesn't look exactly the same to the person on the ground that it does to you.
Yeah.
And the last thing I will say, and we went through this together, but during COVID, for the agency, having to remember because FEMA had this weird thing where we thought we were impervious to disasters. It was like if you had the blue jacket on, nothing bad would happen to you. But it's not true. So you have to think about how you run your business operations, how
Hmm.
you keep the agency running when you're also impacted. There
Hmm.
were multiple times, even hurricanes came up uh, through the NCR, and we had to put generator trucks, right? And they're plugged into FEMA headquarters to make sure it
Yeah.
stayed up and running. So when you're impacted, you have to remember how to take care of yourself first, and then
Yeah.
make sure you're carrying out your mission.
Yeah, that's so important. I think the other thing too is, and I want to talk about because this is my home for so many years in FEMA. You did a little stint in the external affairs shop, so that had to be an interesting experience, sort of running all the things from public affairs to congressional affairs to intergovernmental affairs, all of that stuff, right? So that gave you a front row seat really to see how the government and government agency communicates during a crisis. What did you take away from that experience?
No, everything. It was awesome. So, I refer to my time in external affairs as my accidental detail. You
Yeah.
asked early on, sort of what did I think about my career trajectory, and never, never, ever, ever did I think that I would be the deputy director in external affairs. So, I had this awesome opportunity. Pete Gaynor was the administrator. He called me up to his office. I was the deputy in ops, and I say, asked me. We know I wasn't asked. He told me I was going to go into external affairs for a while, just to help round out my experience, help the agency from the EA perspective, and just cross over between ops and external affairs. And all those specialties and functional areas of EA that you just rattled off.
Mhm.
Admittedly, I didn't even know they existed. Not in a, I'm a moron. I didn't know. So I spent this, and the timing on this is important. I got there in October of 19. And I told the team, a couple of things, part of which was just let's slow down a little bit. Not, in the slow is smooth, smooth is fast approach. It was very frenetic. There was a lot going on.
Yeah.
And I wanted to understand it. And then January of 2020, we had the earthquake in Puerto Rico, and
Mhm.
then quickly thereafter COVID started. So the whole idea of understanding things slowly didn't really play out, but
Yeah.
it was awesome. Well, one, the external affairs machine at FEMA is phenomenal, and by
Mhm.
extension, the department, the White House teams, like all of them were really good at what they do, and they understood the different disciplines of external affairs, intergovernmental affairs, public affairs, disaster communications, crisis
Mhm.
communications, all these things. And I got to hang out with a lot of people, but some of the coolest communicators,
Yeah.
people who really explain the difference between a graphic and a person on TV, or one of the folks I worked with, we were rewriting the senior leadership brief, and they said, "Well, what's the most important thing that you look at?" All of it is, and they broke it down and explained, no, the top left corner is where you draw your eyes to, and all of these things where it's this like it's a science and an art.
Yeah.
So I learned an absolute ton, and then the kind of key takeaway for me, and I hold this true no matter where I am in the world now, is one, always have a communicator with you if you can. And two, make sure that your operational team is giving the EA side of the house as much information as they possibly can get. The team does great job creating trade space. If the narrative is that the agency, or by extension the nation, or the response is going well,
Mhm.
you can make all the decisions you need to operationally. If the narrative is that we're flailing or failing, you're forced into some decisions that maybe aren't the best operationally, but it pacifies one of the concerns that are raised. So, yeah, absolutely awesome time. I spent about 8 months, 4 days, 3 hours and 21 minutes. But it was great, and learned an absolute, probably the most amount in a compressed period of time I've ever learned in my career.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think the other thing too, I mean, I'm sure it was a great experience, but I'm sure it was tough, especially the time that you were there, overlapping with COVID. Public trust was quite fragile then. I think it's even arguably more fragile today than it was, a decade ago, let's just say. How do you feel like the information, having that experience, right? How has the information environment changed, emergency response?
Uh, so I'll talk about the positive ways first.
Yeah.
So one, you would have in any community, you'd have a klaxon siren that goes off, and that told people something was going on. Like,
Hmm.
okay, I know it's a warning. but that doesn't give me anything. Now, with the ability for almost near real-time alert and warning systems nationwide, disseminating everything from Amber Alerts to flood alerts to,
Mhm.
in some cases, even earthquake notifications prior to the shake, just, seconds.
Yeah.
The technology and messaging has just amplified so much that you can push an alert and warning out so much faster. Um, from a response perspective, it's amazing how quickly you can get information. An example, so there was an earthquake in Alaska in, I've lost track of time, but let's call it 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And CNN or a news outlet was showing on TV, one car in one culvert that had sort of dropped in. And everyone's like, hey, Anchorage is completely isolated. Using Google Maps, you're able to see that there's moving traffic in and around Anchorage. So you're like, okay, it's not isolated. Right?
Right.
Whereas years before that, you'd have to try and get through. The phone lines were down, all these problems. So I think from that perspective, the information moving towards alert warning, situational awareness is awesome. On the risk side, though, it's very real. Uh, Day in and day out, you're saturated by information. Some of it is well intended. So some of it's accurate, well intended
Mhm.
and accurate. Some of it's well intended but inaccurate. And some of it is maliciously intended and
Yeah.
inaccurate. We saw through many disasters where adversaries took advantage of the distrust that you talked about
Mhm.
and amplified that and made everyone's jobs that much harder, right? We saw it in the Maui wildfires where people were told, hey, if you register for individual assistance, you're actually submitting the deed of your land and turning it over to the government. That's not the case, but
Mhm.
it's really hard to combat that narrative when
Mhm.
it sounds legit, right?
Mhm.
There's news outlets, 24-hour news outlets, social media, all the things that are pushing a message to you.
Yeah.
We just have to be careful about how we communicate clearly
Yeah.
and how we do it in a trustworthy way.
Yeah. And how you combat that misinformation,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
if that's out there, then, you want to make sure that the message, the truth is getting out.
Yeah.
I think FEMA had a really interesting approach to that. And I don't know if they still do like kind of the myth versus fact.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
these are
That
kind
was
of the
great.
rumors that are on the ground, and
Yep.
they learn that through the, what's in the news, what's on social media, and paying attention to those things. But, here's this rumor about individual assistance. Well, here's the truth, and that's, kind of dispel those rumors. But there's
I
only so
thought
much that you can do.
Oh, I agree. I thought Deanne, previous administrator, did a great job. She did a lot of things well, but one of the things she did re remarkably well was when she was doing live interviews and people would question, "Hey, where is FEMA?" Or "I heard this." She would
Mm.
actually speak back to the reporters and say, "Great, I can't be everywhere. My teams can't be everywhere. Where did you hear that? Or where did you see that? Or where do where's there a
Mhm.
need? Help me, right? So make it." Important team effort, but more importantly, if independent reporters or news folks are out and about and they see something, it's their job to report on it. I got it, but
Yeah.
also they can be a censor, right? They
Yeah.
can they can provide that information back. And I thought the end did a really good job of saying, "Cool, I hear you. Give me more details and let me give it to my team, and we'll go work it to ground."
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important, especially with all the information that's out there.
Yeah.
Um, I think one thing about emergency managers, I think we can both agree on is that the field tracks people who tend to care very deeply, who are very passionate. But I think the work, and you'll probably agree with this too, it can take a really personal toll. So for you personally, how did you manage the years of stress and the weight of the work that was coming at you? I mean, pretty constantly, and like stay sane.
I won't answer your last part. That's a judgment
Okay.
call on my sanity. So I agree with you. Like it definitely draws the industry and the profession draws people who are inclined to want to help and share their resources and share their knowledge and experience, capabilities. Um, I will tell you, it's a grind, and you know
Yeah.
this. And I always wanted to be the director of response operations. Like watching, I remember when I was younger in my career, watching like Bill Carwile was a
Hmm.
master of this position, and then just brilliant in everything he did. And you're like, cool, I want that job. And then I
Yeah.
was the deputy for a couple of years, and had a lot of discussions with my wife and my son about, hey, if this opportunity presents itself. this is gonna be on us as a
Hmm.
family. So a couple of things. One, for me, family is super critical and really important. Been married just about 21 years. Have a 13-year-old son who I adore, and they are both my number one priorities. So as much as I gave to work, I
Hmm.
would I heard I think it's Bob Fenton said this one day. He said 51% to family, 49% to work. But don't mistake that. In that 49%, you're going to get everything you possibly need, but you have to have a balance somewhere. And
Hmm.
sometimes the family one and sometimes work one.
Yeah.
Um, there was a disaster that I had worked, and we thought we were fairly stabilized. I had driven my wife and son out to a baseball tournament and got about halfway there and realized that that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
We took a Uber back and flew back to where we needed to go. So I think it's balance is number
Hmm.
one. Two is not compartmentalizing as in don't think about, but compartmentalizing in you cannot let the disaster overtake your entire thought cycle.
Hmm.
Because you have to, particularly the jobs we were in at headquarters, like if you're in the field, it's a little bit different, but at headquarters, you have to be objective and you
Hmm.
have to keep that broader scope about what's going on. Three, um, I love coffee. Don't over caffeinate. But that it's important because it leads to another part for me, which was regular sleep. Even
Hmm.
if it was 4 hours, it's a regular sleep cycle and exercise.
Hmm.
I'm not like super Ultraman, gonna go, knock out all these crazy runs and all these do these things. But even during our super high up tempo,
Hmm.
do something physical for your body every day. Meditation, calisthenics, run, whatever your preference is, but
Yeah.
something that triggers the endorphin side. So you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I got a little bit of balance of the disasters, a little bit of caffeine because you need it, and then a little bit of focus on family. That for me, that's how it kept me moving through the grind. And it was like the last for 5 years, it was a constant state of activation deployments,
Hmm.
which was awesome. You don't want bad things to happen, but you want to be in the position to help the outcome.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. My first ever deployment, field deployment, was to New York after Hurricane Sandy.
Yeah.
First of all, there's like pictures of me at a wedding the weekend before I deployed on my
Yeah.
BlackBerry back then,
Yeah. I
like
know it.
taking
Yeah.
calls. And then, when I was there, I remember being like, God, I'm just being horrible to my body, like eating dinner at 11:30 at night, and it's like a slice of greasy New York pizza, which I'm not
Hey, nothing
complaining. It
wrong with
was
that.
kind of good.
Nothing
All
wrong with
right.
that.
But I also, I walked home, most of the subway stations. I was going back and forth from Manhattan to Staten Island. That's where I was for the
Yeah.
deployment. And so going to the ferry, like I would walk. And so
Yeah.
I kind of felt like it all balanced out. Like, I'm at least getting exercise, even though I'm eating poorly and probably not getting enough sleep ever. But, I'm also doing some good for myself. So I think that's really important when you're in the disaster, right? When you're responding to the disaster, to make sure that you're finding balance somewhere, right? And also relying on the support that you really do need from your family and friends. I remember feeling very isolated.
Hmm.
Um, and like none of my friends or my family could really understand what was going on or how busy I was or anything like that. And so I think you have to find that support somewhere.
Yeah. And then, to that point, make sure that you are taking care of as many people as you can, not just the disaster, but your workforce, right?
Yeah,
There was um, the NRCC, out of all the wonderful things we talked about, it's stressful in a different way than being deployed in the field. In the field, you can see the disaster, or you can
sure.
see exactly your outcome and the thing you're fixing.
Yes.
Thousands of miles away, you're in the NRCC. One, you can't see it, and two, for the most part, people are going home at night at the end of their shift, right? They're dealing with commutes, they're dealing with whether you have a small family or you don't have a family, like whatever
Hmm.
your home life is, you're still
Yeah.
dealing with your home life. And that it took me a while to like acknowledge that that's really an issue as well.
Yeah.
DoD had done some really interesting studies about pilots that flew drone operations from domestic bases, but
Hmm.
in overseas active engagements, same sort of thing. Like, you're working in NRCC and it is the number one thing that you are focused on. And in some cases, at least the first 72 hours, the nation is focused on.
Yeah.
Then you're leaving and you're stuck in traffic and you're going to the grocery store and you're doing all these different things and trying to balance a quote unquote normal life.
Yeah.
And you come back into it and you're like, oh my God, there's this this massive list of problem sets I've got to go solve,
Hmm.
and trying to strike that balance, but knowing, um, hey, at the end of your 12-hour shift, you have to hand it off to the next person
Yeah.
because no one is going to be functional if you try and keep working 24s for,
Hmm.
a day. It's just, it doesn't work. So you have to get into a rhythm where you trust your body and your brain
Yeah.
and your counterpart to say, hey, I'm going to hand this off to you. I'll be back in 12 hours and be on time. I'll be back and I'll bring you coffee
Yeah,
or
yeah.
bourbon, depending upon which way we're going on shift. But that little bit of trust goes such a long way.
Yeah. And the other thing too is like switching gears. Like, when you're in that high stress, high stakes environment, coming home and like, you know, packing lunch for your
Yeah.
kids the next day, like doing these like mundane, like normal routine things,
Yep.
it can be hard to switch gears, I think.
And one of the things that was really hard for me was the last couple of years we had not just natural disasters, but we had some national security issues,
Hmm.
a lot of geopolitics that were in play that impacted the national security side of the FEMA mission.
Sure.
And while it's easy to talk about what's going on TV, disasters and the like, I would say to my wife or my son, "Hey, I'm gonna be at work because of this." Some of those other things that really drew a lot of our time and a lot of attention. They weren't as public.
Mm.
So being able to negotiate that space in your own head, and being able to still keep the normal lifestyle that you're trying to balance and keep your team moving in a direction, because a lot of times, it wasn't this large response. It was a small select group of people that were trying to plan for a contingency if it played out. So I think more and more, now than ever before, that whole national security mission is critically important.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. So, I think the threat environment today, it just feels very interconnected, if you will. Everything from, we talked about misinformation, cyber incidents, infrastructure risks, right? Climate-driven disasters, whatever you want to talk about, right? There's just a plethora of different things that we're facing as a nation now or globally today. My question is, are we adapting fast enough? Are we doing enough to address all of these different things?
Yes and no. How
Yeah.
about that? How's that for answer? So it's sort of like the messaging. I think there's a lot of adopt adaptation and adoption that's moving pretty quickly.
Hmm.
So you're absolutely right. The threat vectors and the interconnective nature of all these threats is something I have not seen it. Each day it becomes more and more interconnected.
Sure.
Each day it's more and more dependent on different outcomes. So a couple specific examples. One, you talked about the cyber side. Well, we'll speak about that in a second, but we are also having, these reinforcing risk problems where the example that we talk about regularly is, so California goes through wildfires, then that burn scar creates, where the fires create some burn scar that then
Hmm.
when there's a flood season, places flood that has historically not flooded. Then
Hmm.
unfortunately there's a drought right now, so you're seeing early fire starts and then more fire, right? And it just cycles back through.
Yeah.
And yes, there's mitigation, and yes, there are things people are doing, but there's only so much you can do when it's this constant disruption.
Hmm.
Um, so that's, sort of problem set one. Two, we know, and we just talked about, sort of adversaries are keenly interested in targeting the US for a variety of things in cyberspace. And that is, we have become so dependent on our cyber connectivity that when it goes down,
Yeah.
create a bit of a problem. There was the cell outage, maybe what, 2 months ago, 3 months ago,
Hmm.
and just in my town here, I remember my wife and I were out for a walk, and you could sort of see where there was all this congestion that normally didn't happen, and it was because the DoorDash or Uber Eats drivers were all doing their pickups, evening pickups, but the cell wasn't working, so they didn't know where to pick up and where to deliver to. And that's
Right.
just a microcosm,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
A
yeah.
tiny little microcosm of these cell dependencies. Um, so I think in that sense, we're creating, additional vulnerabilities each day. That said, on the are we doing enough to adapt? I'm working on a super cool project now about AI adoption in emergency management and how you can use certain tools, and we see them every day. I'm not just talking about your LLMs, but like some of
Yeah.
the predictive analytics tools, some of the computer vision tools that we're seeing for modeling, that you're seeing for damage assessment, debris, all that that used to take days and
Yeah.
hundreds of people hours, right? Folks getting out on the ground, doing all this stuff, collecting all this information super fast. Urban search and rescue, like the computer capability that from if you benchmarked like Surfside building collapse to Maui fires to Helene wide area search, all the technology that was used and has grown over time to make the search that much more effective and that much more efficient, like that's awesome. So I say yes and no, right,
Yeah.
which is kind of a cop-out answer, I acknowledge. But there's super great advancements, but I think we always have to remember, and this is just my pitch to anybody who happens to listen to this, pace planning,
Hmm.
primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. It's not just an acronym that we use in the federal government. It's something you can use in your daily life.
Hmm.
Put a map in your car. When Google Maps doesn't work, have an ADC or a McNally map in your car so you know how to get from point A to point B. So just do basic contingency planning, but I think overall net positive.
Yeah. And if what emerging technology, start that over. I'm gonna cut that out.
Yeah.
What emerging technology would you be paying attention to if you were still leading FEMA operations today? I mean, you mentioned a couple.
Yeah. So we made some great advances, and I know the team continues to make great advancements on what I refer to as digital real estate in the
Hmm.
NRCC. So you've been in the NRCC, right? It's boards everywhere, but
Hmm.
it becomes white noise. You just don't notice it. So how do you leverage computer vision
Hmm.
for what kind of information you're trying to display? So I think that's one area. Two, there really is. I mentioned on the search and rescue side, there's some amazing capability and some super cool stories about how teams used LiDAR and thermal cameras to identify people in heavy debris or in dense mangroves area down in Florida, where they were able to make live rescues using some of this advanced technology.
Yeah.
Um, Drone footage and drone capability for wide area search. Data analytics and predictive analytics for we use this in Helene where the debris became so dense it
Mhm.
was someone actually drew the equivalency to lava and we were able to leverage some NASA lava modeling capability. It was fascinating. So thinking outside the box of what other department agency, what other academic institution, what other organization maybe has some technology dual use that you can leverage onto and figure out how to do it. And then the other thing I would say is uh, especially on the alert and warning side, we
Mhm.
always spend so much time trying to figure out the right message,
Mhm.
translate into multiple languages, make sure you're hitting survivor or meeting the survivor where they are with a message that they understand, they trust.
Mhm.
Technology has advanced pretty far in the ability to translate information accurately,
Yeah.
pretty quickly as well. So I think from those perspectives, crossing the EA side and the operation side is good situational awareness to the extent that you can. Um, Best you can do or advance as much you can on alert and warning, and then on the search and rescue side, leveraging as much technology as you possibly can to
Yeah.
affect as many rescues as you can.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think the other thing too is that emergency management really has it's a people business, right? It's built on relationships and trust, maybe more so than other fields, right? But how do we integrate those different advanced technologies without losing the human judgment piece? I think that's one piece that, a lot of people are concerned about.
Yeah, it's a great question and one that I grapple with regularly. I put something into your LLM of choice and it looks about right.
Yeah.
Here's the analogy I use. Every morning, I look at the Weather Channel and I look at the forecast. I
Hmm.
still stick my head outside. I still put my hand out the door
Right.
because I'm somehow going to gauge the temperature. But it's like you use it as an information source, but not the sole decision authority. You get in the car, whether you use Google Maps or Waze. How many times you've been driving and Google Maps or Waze says, "Hey, turn left here." Like I know a better way.
Hmm.
And it's that human intuition, whether it's called human in the loop, that's a separate side. But like don't put all of your trust into the system, but at the same time, it's okay to leverage the capability that exists, right? We used to write these massive senior leadership briefs. Someone once told me, "Hey, it's on page 46 of the SLB." I was like, "Oof, that is neither senior nor leadership nor brief." Got it. Right, but there's technology now that you can interrogate and play with and actually show a story, whether it's a storyboard or literally like an API fed dashboard and see some of the super cool technology. acknowledging that yes, this is one great, but back to that pace planning, what happens if it's down? I still have a no-fail job.
Hmm.
But yeah, just be a human and go back to yes, the Weather Channel said it's not going to rain, but if you look outside and it's cloudy, well, throw a rain jacket in the bag.
You're reminding me of that episode of The Office where I think is it Dwight and Michael? They are following GPS and it says to turn, and they're
Yeah.
like, no, that's like a body of water right there. But they turn anyway because the GPS said to, and
Yeah.
then there's the car in the water.
I literally, I was out the other day and I saw a car turn left onto the WNOD trail because it's a light, but it's only a light on 123. And I'm certain their GPS said turn left at the next light,
Uh-huh.
and they saw the light and they turned.
You're like,
So,
okay.
yeah, this goes back to my fire department days, and it's like it's a little bit of Darwinism in there, but you're like, hey, just pay attention.
Hmm.
Pay attention to what the system is telling you, but we are fortunate enough to have the processing power as well. So it's
Right.
like, hey, this doesn't look right. You know, think about it
Maybe
for
we
just a
question
second.
it.
Think about it just for a couple seconds. Yeah.
That's good advice.
Yeah, there's one of the initiatives a counterpart team is working on over at Aspen Institute. They call it Take Nine, and it's this super great initiative on
Yes.
cybersecurity. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's like
Yeah.
literally take 9 seconds.
Yeah.
I love it because one, it's easy to remember, but it's I taught my wife and son the same thing. Just something doesn't look right, just don't be so happy to go click on it. Just take 9 seconds. And
Yeah.
same sort of thing in society. Like, does that sound about right? It's okay to question it.
Yeah, it's good advice, not just in the cyber field, but just in
Yeah,
general. Like take a beat, take nine
yeah,
seconds, think about it
yeah.
before you take any action.
Yeah, nothing is going to change that quickly,
Hmm.
right? So it's like, okay, just take a beat, grab a
Yeah.
sip of water, just think it
Yeah.
through.
What's keeping you up at night right now? What are you most concerned about, and what are you working towards making better, hopefully?
So I've been super fortunate. Uh, when I was in the ops position, I had 4 phones and I slept with a checklist under my bed.
You have four
Not
phones?
Yeah, not because I was cool. It's just the position, right? You just
Yeah.
gotta always be reachable.
Yeah.
Um, and I sleep much better now because I don't. My personal phone has not been on ring in almost a year.
I love that for you.
I do. Back to the weight on your shoulders. Like you don't realize it because you're in these positions. You're surrounded by great people. You're doing
It's your norm.
yeah, exactly
Yeah.
right, and you're running red line for a long time.
Yeah.
Um, as a side note, I slept pretty well when I was in ops too, to the point where my phone would ring and my wife would wake me. So people are just like, "How do you never miss a call?" I was like, "Well, I get the second alert, which is my wife saying, grab your phone."
Hey, answer your phone so it'll stop ringing.
Yes, yes, that was much nicer than she would say. But yes, there was a not so gentle reminder to answer my phone. So I think overall, like the geopolitical space that we're in now, gives me pause. Raises some concerns about as a nation, like
Mhm.
how do we react to those things for many, many, many years, many decades. Or domestically, we were separated by the oceans, notwithstanding Hawaii, CNMI, and the Pacific, but like the threats were not here domestically, and I think that they are now, whether it's criminal, whether it's terrorism, whether it's nation state, penetrating cyber and physical spaces, that's a concern. Uh, to We talked about technology. The adoption of technology at speed is
Mhm.
awesome and creating so many opportunities and reducing this barrier to creation. Like you have an idea, it can be a thing.
Yeah.
But with that comes an insane amount of risk. So thinking about that in a very practical way. And then, emergency management has federally and state and local has had a tumultuous year and a half. The profession of emergency management, whether it was the unfortunate shutdowns of the training institutes, the lack of access to grant dollars, a lot of things that really put into limbo and into question how the profession was going to handle the future. I think
Mhm.
the past couple of weeks have been a great trajectory, very positive. Things coming out of the FEMA Council report getting released,
Yeah.
nominee for an administrator. Um, Bob coming in as the senior official performing the duties, right, stabilizing
Mhm.
force. So all good things. And then talking to state and local emergency managers, they're seeing the positive trend as well. And now we have, as a profession, emergency managers have an opportunity this summer Starting a couple weeks, you have hurricane season, you've got the 250th, you've got FIFA World Cup, you've got big ships, or tall
Hmm.
ships, you've got all these opportunities where, back to the first thing we talked about, what is the role of the emergency manager, that coordinator role, some super cool opportunities to come up. So I think from, cheering on the team that's still doing the actual work in there, and then from my perspective, trying to do as much as I can to help those people to help the people that are helping others. So
Yeah.
whether it's providing technical assistance, providing advice, the project I talked about AI integration, just areas where I made the conscious decision not to be directly in the fight anymore, but still have the
Hmm.
passion to help emergency management. I get to teach a little bit, so all of those things to sort of continue the draw into the space without being directly in it right now.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you are still offering that support
Yeah.
and that, there are some things to be concerned about, but there are some things to be hopeful about too, or excited about too. It's all about balance, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And you mentioned you're doing some teaching. So for younger professionals that are either interested in or maybe just entering the field of emergency management right now, what skills do you feel like are becoming more important now, maybe than ever?
So I'll answer this reverse. I originally, when I started emergency management early 2000s,
Hmm.
uh, it was a job that former firefighters and police officers and military folks, they took.
Hmm.
We've grown so much, right? And
Yeah.
response is just one tiny sliver of EM: mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery.
Yeah.
Um, so while that's kind of where I spend a lot of my time is, but you need true emergency managers, and these are community planners, they're grant specialists, they're financial folks, they're mitigators, they're recovery experts, they're
Yeah.
insurers. The crossover between insurance and emergency management is so absolute. Like, all of these industries can help feed the profession. So I think to folks that are interested in joining the ranks of emergency management, I wouldn't. I would encourage them to look broadly across the spectrum of EM and not just say, I want to go be a log chief or an ops chief or something like that. Those
Mhm.
specialties are super cool, but start broad. Back to my experience in EA, go be an external affairs officer, right?
Yeah.
Think about what it's like to try and communicate in 30 seconds what you normally get to write a 20-page IAP on. So I think diversity in the emergency management field in your career track is really important.
Yeah.
Two, I've had awesome mentors. Like there's a guy named Rob Lee who I worked for at DOT, who we call him OG. He's the original gangster.
Okay.
He was a Vietnam era Cobra helicopter pilot,
Wow.
but signed all of his emails "warm regards" and meant it. Right, so it was this perfect balance. But he created space for all of us to go to National Defense University master's programs, to do
Hmm.
different details, and but also to do your job. So
Hmm.
I think finding a really good mentor is super important, and not just above you. I've
Hmm.
had a ton of peer mentors and
Yeah.
people that are beneath me in experience or grade. Um, you can mentor them, but they can also really mentor you. So finding specific mentor relationships where you're learning from people, the whole 360, like, really
Hmm.
embrace that. I think that's critically important as you grow up. And then have a plan. I always had a loose plan about kind of where I wanted to go. Uh, but I think if you're coming into this field, notwithstanding the sort of last year of sort of uncomfortable space of, I can't find a job, I don't know who's hiring. Like, we'll get past that.
Yeah.
I have the utmost confidence we'll get past that. Applying for federal jobs, applying for state emergency management jobs, local emergency management jobs, voluntary jobs. And private sector emergency management is another area where, if you were coming into the industry now, it's a, hey, go look there, right?
Hmm.
Companies need and are embracing the need for emergency managers, not just for, excuse me, their response,
Yeah.
their continuity planning, their exercise planning, and all these things. So, like, I love EM. I think it's awesome. Anybody that wants to join this field, I happy to help. But I think it's really important to, be broad in your approach, have a really good mentor, and have a plan that you can follow as you go.
Yeah, I think this is great advice, even for folks who are not in emergency management, right? Like
Oh,
those
yeah,
are things you can apply to really any field. Maybe in particular emergency management, but anybody who's entering the workforce. I mean, these are great places to look and things to keep in mind for your career as you move forward.
100%.
if you were to go back and give yourself advice as you were starting out, what advice would you give your younger self?
My younger self and I talk all the time. It's great.
Yeah.
I feel like I am. Like your back hurts. Why? Because I sneezed. Um, so a couple of things that I always sort of reinforce in my own head. One, um, when you're young, you don't think a lot about taking care of your body
Hmm.
and your brain. So I think both your physical health and your mental health, 20 years old, riding on fire trucks, I'm all about it, right? But it takes a toll. So the inverse of that is invest early, stretch every day, meditate, do something for your body that is
Hmm.
is healthy for it because it will pay dividends when you're older.
Hmm.
Two, on the mental health side, and we talked about this a bunch, is whatever your release valve is, know what that is and have a plan for not there's a term actually it came up in California, it's BLEVE. It's a boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion. It's when
Okay.
right? You don't want that to happen inside your own head. So
Yeah.
what are your relief valves? What are things where you find escape that are healthy and positive, but know
Hmm.
those and build them in.
Hmm.
The other side is I and I talk about this with anybody who's junior coming in, like chase the opportunity, not the grade. No
Yeah.
one is drawn to public service because of the salary. Like we can compensate, it's fine, but it is not the most lucrative
Yeah.
career track you can go down. But and the struggle's real, especially in DC and other metros. Like you have to make a certain level of money, but chase the opportunities. I have
Hmm.
been so fortunate throughout my career that these little opportunities pop up, but take advantage of them. So I was
Hmm.
like, hey, you want to work on a Saturday? Sure. Why? What are we doing? Hey, we're gonna go, to the White House to do this exercise. That's super cool. Sure. I'm glad I said yeah. So,
Yeah.
chase the opportunities, not the grade. Don't be so focused on, okay, I got the GS level, I gotta go. Um, so I think that's really important. And then on the financial side, and this ties back to my previous, is you know, invest early
Mhm.
in the sense of like you're investing in your future, you're creating some space for yourself. Um, this is not a podcast on financial investments, nor am I someone who should speak wisely about them. But it's like, hey, just think about, how do you set up investment accounts and brokerage accounts. We just at FEMA, it was we didn't really talk about that as a group, and I think
Mhm.
understanding like career track is really important, but understanding financial literacy and planning is equally important. We talk about it from a disaster preparedness perspective.
Mhm.
I think it's really important. To my younger self, I would have, probably talked about that earlier on, because by the time you start to think about that, it's not too late, but it's one of those like, hey, start in your 20s, it works out a little bit better for you. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
And last thing I would say, Laura, have fun. Like, I, I had a ton of fun as younger me. I like being older me too, but I had a ton of fun. I rode fire trucks in the evening. I worked on the hill. I worked in these super cool jobs. I got to be on all these deployments and go to these disasters and like literally hands-on help people and do all this awesome stuff. So embrace it. And then this is the other thing is I know we all take pictures now all the time. Take notes. I
Yeah.
keep, I keep a OneNote of like quotes and funny stories, and I have for years. And I went back and went scrolled to the very top of it, and just one of my favorites I came across though was a friend of ours said, "What is this meeting really about? We're not here to talk about inflatable unicorns and giant scissors, are we?" I'll give you the context of that some other time, but just jot it down because it's funny memories, and you're like, "Oh man, remember that time when?"
Yeah.
So yeah, embrace it and have fun. And
Yeah, I love that. And actually that's funny you mentioned. I think so Natalie and Clade, a good friend of mine and former FEMA colleague, was on an early episode, and that was one of her pieces of advice too, is to like keep a journal of the things that you
yeah,
do and like weird things that happen that you think you'll remember, but one day you're not, and you can look
yeah.
back on and laugh or cry or whatever.
Yeah, and it is really funny the things that to Natalie's point of like in the moment you're like, I'm gonna remember this the rest of my life. And
Yeah.
then we're something else really weird happens, you're like, huh, what was that thing I wanted to remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, jot it down, make a note. And then for stuff like this, and I can't thank you enough for doing this podcast. I love listening to them.
Okay.
Because it's sort of like a walk down memory lane for me with a lot of colleagues and friends. Be
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, remember when?
Yeah.
Uh, and you can pull some of those back out and you're like, oh, that's a great story. And it's when I teach, you try not to tell too many stories of like when I was there,
Right.
but it's very applicable because there's textbook academic approaches to emergency management that are critically important to teach. And then there's the practical side of, okay, this is where we jumped from, the academic into the practical. And having that experience is just, it's been a blast.
Yeah, no, it's so good to hear. And I think, just kind of following the thread of the advice is like plan for the future, but enjoy the moment, right?
Yeah.
Don't forget what you're living now is something that you're going to look back on one day and like I said, either laugh or cry, but you'll have
Yeah.
those experiences, those memories, and you can look back and know hopefully that you've made an impact, you've made a difference. And I think for a lot of public servants or people who go into emergency management, in whatever capacity, like that's kind of the goal. So when you look back on your service, and I don't want to age you, but you did mention you've been married almost 21 years. So, 2 decades of service plus. What does service mean to you now?
Uh, a couple of things, and I love that question. Because I always, I was a Cub Scout when I was a kid, and the fire department and public service. I I was always drawn to it. I always felt like you were putting good karma into the universe, right? You were helping people.
Hmm.
And when I was, Sarah and I were talking, my wife and I were talking about, 23 years, is that enough time? What was I going to do next? I
Yeah,
wanted to find something that would be, nothing was going to be as rewarding, right?
sure.
So here's the other thing. I don't want to compare myself to other people. I probably one of the few folks that got to do exactly what they wanted to do in their career, right? I always wanted to be the director of response operations. Like I thought that was the coolest job. And I'll tell you, after doing it for 5 years, it's the coolest job. It's literally like in emergency management is the best job. I don't care what anybody says. I'll go toe to toe with them. There's no job better than that in emergency management, federal, state, or local. I loved it.
Yeah.
So very satisfied. Um, so with that, it's like, hey, where do you find your service, your outlet?
Hmm.
So a couple things. One for me, definitely family. I love being a dad. My son, 13, I adore him. He's great. So being able to, closer to home, be of
Yeah.
direct service. And then two, a couple of the projects that I'm working on. So I had this super cool opportunity last summer, started my own company after I left, and have a bunch of different clients that I'm working with. And one of the several of the projects are directly focused on helping emergency managers, whether it's through product design and development, the AI initiative we talked about.
Hmm.
It's being on the margins and being a hub influence some of those outcomes and being able to think through a problem set, right? When
Yeah.
you're in the grind, you can't spend more than 5 minutes thinking about something.
Hmm.
Now I have the luxury of, hey, I'm going to sit and read this paper or read this research report and try and provide these snippets back to the teams that are still working to hopefully make things a little bit better. So, it is a struggle for me each day of like, hey, I always miss the team, right? But you stay connected, you see your friends, but it's
Sure.
this,
It's different.
are you having this
Yeah.
direct impact? And I think being very comfortable with, hey, there's ways to support from the outside. And if nothing else, I always have an open house and a bottle of bourbon so people can stop by. I'm happy to grill, I'm happy to pour a drink, and a beer in an ear goes a long way, especially for those who are still directly involved.
Yeah, well, we found out that your house is apparently the hangout spot, and we're making some exciting improvements to that. So
We
that,
are the drink cooler is going to be here on Friday. So
I'm so excited for you.
yes, yes. We told the boys that they can use the right-hand side of the refrigerator, not the left-hand side. We'll
Right.
segregate alcoholic and non-alcoholic.
That's
We're still
smart.
responsible. Still
Yeah.
responsible.
Still some planner there.
Hey, you gotta. I did actually tying that back together, but when we had that cell outage, I have an old school phone, like literally plain old telephone
Oh
line
yeah,
into my
yeah,
house.
yeah.
Taught my son how to use it. Generational thing. He picked it up. He's like, "What's the noise?" I was like, it's a dial
Dial
tone,
tone.
right? And also, like when you think about it, when you push a phone button on a real phone, you have to push it all the way down. On
Hmm.
like a Google phone or Apple phone, you just tap it. So like going through that whole process as well. So, but yeah, I'll leave it there. That's that's where
My
I am with
parents.
service.
My parents for the longest time had a rotary phone in
Yeah.
their bedroom, and I think that would like blow my kid's mind at this point. Like I don't even know if they've ever seen a house phone.
Yep. I will admit when I was young and went to a rotary phone for the first time because we had push buttons, I
Yeah.
put my finger in it and
You're like,
couldn't.
where's the
Yeah,
button?
yep. But now you like I don't know about you, but like I long for some of the old school
I
technology
know.
sometimes.
I know Craig and I, when he was on, we had a whole conversation about Blackberries. And man, that was like technology was so advanced with the
Yeah.
Blackberry. You could go on the internet and you could send a text and you didn't have to hit the button so many times. Like it was just, and now look at us.
I was on the Hill when the Blackberries first came out, and I remember the congressman I worked for at the time, it was right after 9/11, they gave him the members, and he was playing with it, and he went like that as a joke. He's like, "Ha ha, I'm gonna call you," and I was like, "Ha ha ha," because you're like, "Oh, that technology." We had pagers, right? Um,
Right.
I still have my pager, um, but technology has advanced so much. You sort of just, I'm like, I just want to put on a record and sip
Yeah.
a cup of coffee and call it old school. It's okay. I love technology, but I want to also just take a break sometimes.
Yeah, really. Well, I know there's a lot to be excited about. There's you mentioned some of the projects that you're working on now. If people are interested in connecting with you or following some of that work, where can people find you?
So a couple places. One, I like hanging out on LinkedIn. I think it's a great forum for professional exchanges, some dialogue and posting, so you can find me there. Provincial Strategies is the name of my company, so provincialstrategies.com. And just, I know we talked a lot about my family, but Provincial Strategies, Provincial Drive was the name of the street we lived on when Cooper was born. So sort of a nod to where the family started.
I love that.
And then I'm a senior advisor over at the Aspen Institute as well. So we post blogs on Aspen Institute's website. And then we talked a little bit about the AI initiative, but aidinitiative.org is the website, and I'll send that to you as well. But I think any of those places, and as I mentioned a couple of times, always happy to chat, happy to talk about these things. So feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for being here. I'm so glad you were able to share some of this and have this conversation and share coffee with me. It was so good to have you. And I look forward to continuing to follow your work and seeing what comes next.
Thanks. It was great to be on. I really appreciate it.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Careers and Coffee Talk. Big thanks to today's guest for pouring out so many great insights. And hey, thanks to you for hanging out with us. If this episode gave you a little jolt of inspiration or made your day a bit more brewed and balanced, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Got a minute? Drop me a 5-star review. It's basically the podcast equivalent of buying me a fancy oat milk latte. Quick disclaimer though, the views expressed in this episode are personal and do not reflect those of any organization. Anyway, until next time, stay curious, stay caffeinated, and keep chasing the career that makes you feel the most alive. Catch you next time.